All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi and welcome to today's APBP Live. This is Kit Keller, Executive Director of APBP, and I am delighted to have with us Kevin Lucas. He is APBP's first fellow, and he will be leading us through this conversation. The mechanics of this activity is that it's intended to be an open conversation. That said, each of you in the webinar are muted, so when you do want to talk, you'll need to raise your hand, or we can also call on you. We're presuming that you have the ability to speak. We recognize that not everyone who is connected by computer will have that option, so if we ask for you to make a comment and you don't want to or can't, passing is perfectly fine. You can post a note in the chat box or the question box if you'd like. In order to ensure that you can be unmuted, I need you to, if you're calling in on a phone, to be sure to enter your audio PIN. And it looks like so far everyone has. You don't need an audio PIN if you're connecting by microphone and speaker. So, Kevin, shall we take a moment and ask people to introduce themselves briefly and perhaps give a sentence about why they're interested in the topic?
I think that'd be great.
Okay, great. Well, I see that Byron Rushing has joined us, so what I'm going to do is unmute Byron's line. And Byron, welcome, you're on the air. Please introduce yourself and give us a sentence or two about why you're interested in this topic.
Hey, Kit. Thank you. This is Byron Rushing. I'm the Bicycle and Pedestrian Planner at the Atlanta MPO, and I'm also a brand new board member for APBP. And I think the topic is very interesting, but I'm also trying to get the hang of the APBP Live things.
Great. Thank you so much, Byron. I'll mute your line now. And I go next to Dan Allison. Dan, your line is unmuted. And Dan, are you able to speak? If you are, your line is unmuted. We'll come back to Dan, or, oops, he's actually offline right now. So next, David Takamoto-Wirtz. David, your line is unmuted. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, David.
Hi. Yeah, I'm the bicycle coordinator at University of California in Davis, and I'm interested in this topic just because it might have some impact on some facility design that we're thinking about.
Oh, great. Good. Welcome, and thanks for being here, David. Okay, next we'll go to Eileen McCarthy. Eileen, your line is unmuted. If you'll introduce yourself. And
okay, I'll try. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Good. I sit on the DC Pedestrian Advisory Council in Washington, D.C., and I'm a former lawyer, retired. I don't have the kind of level of expertise that a lot of you have, but I've been a pedestrian since I was a child. I've never driven a car, and I have basically a pathological hatred of right-on red, but I'm mostly here to listen and learn from others.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll appreciate hearing more about your perspective. So next we'll go to Jody Keenan. And Jody, your line is open.
Hi, this is Catherine from the town of Camilla. We are currently dealing with some right turn on red issues within our community and kind of wanted to see what others were doing to combat this issue.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jody. And did you say that your name is Jody, or did you introduce yourself differently?
Catherine.
Catherine. Oh, okay. All right. So for some reason the name is coming up as Jody Keenan. So just be sure to introduce yourself when you speak. That would be great. Next we'll go to John Mark Lucas. Welcome. Your line is open.
Hi everyone, this is John Mark Lucas. I'm with Greenway Transportation Planning in St. Paul, Minneapolis area. I'm also on the board of St. Paul Smart Trips. We're just trying to put together an initiative at the moment, Walk St. Paul, and you know, as a practitioner, I've been working overseas. I've always thought, that the right turn on red is a particular challenge for pedestrians in the U.S. So trying to learn more about how to overcome these challenges.
Excellent. Thanks, John Mark. And next we'll open Mariel Brown's line. Mariel, are you there? Your line is open.
Hi, I'm here. I am the Bicycle and Pedestrian Planning Manager at TrailNet. We're a nonprofit in St. Louis, and I'm really just here to listen. There hasn't been any action on right turn on red in my region, but I'm kind of trying to figure out how we can maybe think about restricting right turn on red.
Great.
Or at least educate people about it.
Excellent. Thank you. And we're looking forward to seeing you in person soon in September for the PDS. All right. So next I'll circle back to Dan Allison. Dan, I'm going to try to unmute your line. It doesn't look like I can for some reason. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. So, Dan, if you would like to introduce yourself, you can post a note to the question box or the chat box, and I'll share that with the audience. I think we have gone full circle and talked with everyone. So, Dan, I see your hand is raised, but I still can't unmute your line. So I'm showing that you're on a microphone and speaker. If that is not what you're using, if you're using a telephone, you'll just want to look at your audio tab and select the correct setting. That may be what's preventing me from opening your line. So, Kevin, back to you. Please introduce yourself, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Kevin Lucas. I'm APBP's fellow. I actually introduced this topic to APBP Live last month. It's one of my pet project issues, and we had actually a really robust conversation about it. And some of those I believe are with us today, and I hope Dan Allison actually can get his audio working, because he had a lot of good things to say. And it would be great if you could continue to speak up on this issue. Yeah, last month we went all the way to the end of time, but we never really got down to what we as an organization should do, but in terms of policy. And I'm hoping that this time we can do that, continue a robust conversation, and then get down to how we should approach the issue. Just a moment, quickly here. At the last session, this is kind of a rough outline of the ideas that were discussed as the problem, and you can look at them here as we talk. A lot of the discussion centered around a more suburban or rural context, because in those environments there are less pedestrians typically, and cars are more likely to be in a position to turn faster. But we know that this is an issue in cities as well, and I'm hoping to hear from you guys right now, maybe how you see the right turn on red in your communities, and how this has been an issue. And we'll get down to some possible solutions later. But right now, I'm just interested in maybe any efforts or any observations of the problem in your own communities or in your work.
Kevin, this is Kit. If I could jump in for just a moment, we've had 2 more people join us, and Dan Allison is also working on his connection. So I'd like to open the line for Andrew Blanchard. And Andrew, what we've been doing is introducing ourselves and saying a sentence or two about why we're interested in this topic. So if you're able to communicate verbally with us through your connection, Andrew, your line is open. And we realize not everyone has an audio connection on their computer. But Andrew, if you're there, your line is open. Okay, we'll come back to Andrew. And Andrew, if you'd like to announce your or introduce yourself using the question or the chat box, you can certainly do that. And then next I'd like to go to Michael King. And Michael is a former board member of APBP, so we're really delighted that he has joined us. And Michael, your line is open if you're able to introduce yourself now. Michael, are you there? Okay, we'll come back to Michael. So Dan Allison is back, so we'll see if we can connect with Dan. Dan, your line is open, but it looks like you don't have audio yet. So Dan Allison is the Safe Routes to School Coordinator for San Juan Unified School District in Sacramento, California region, and his interest is that right turns are a concern to students. So with that, Kevin, I will go back to your question and ask you to raise that question again, and we will go to whoever would like to speak. If you'll raise your hand, which is a tool on your attendee bar, I believe, then we'll be able to unmute your line. So Kevin, would you repeat your question?
Yes, I would like to hear from members how Right Turn on Red is affecting them and their communities, and also potentially how it's affecting their work that they're doing. And I can say that one thing that I've seen here in the context I'm in, I actually live in a somewhat suburban area. A lot of the intersections around where I live are designed with pretty wide right turn radiuses, and as you can imagine, this allows for some very fast-moving right turns. And so in particular, when a light immediately turns red, oftentimes a car will try to beat the traffic that's going to be coming and make an extremely fast right turn on their red light without looking, only looking left. That's one way, in my context, that right turn on red is really affecting my community. And also, on the main street, where one wouldn't expect it because there's more pedestrians, there have been several near misses because of buildings being closer to the sidewalk. Cars will pull up a lot further than they should into the crosswalks in order to see left so that they can turn right. And that's some of the ways that it's affected me here outside the New York City area.
Thank you, Kevin. Michael King has his hand raised, so we'll see if we can come back to Michael. Michael, did you have a comment?
Can you hear me now or no?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Oh, evidently my hand was basically from the last time when you said introduce yourself, because I don't know, I couldn't. That's the button I pushed.
Oh, sorry about that. Well, welcome. Will you introduce yourself, and then if you comment on the question?
Michael King. I guess the only comment is that if someone's going to change right turn on red, or if as a goal, then the debate for me, or the question for me, is how to present a compelling story that would then be accepted by those people who are interested in, who have the power to change this kind of thing. And so it's less about the issues, and it's about how to package those issues such that some action will be taken. That's kind of where I'm at with right turn on red. I mean, fundamentally, it's a completely insane proposition to have right turn on red, and the fact that it's allowed is whatever. We can say it's insane all we want, but we need to figure out how to tell the story and package this message if that's what we're going to do.
Great. That's a good point. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm muting your line now, and then I will open up John Mark Lucas's line, and you have your hand raised. John Mark, you're on the air.
Yeah, following up on that comment about how do we package it. I mean, if there's a general understanding or general agreement that right turn on red, unjustly penalizes pedestrian movement, then one way of looking at how to push the argument forward is to look back on what was the source of the right turn on red legislation and what were raised as for and against arguments at that time. I mean, it's not always been there. So I'm sure, when it was introduced, it was because there was an overwhelming desire to have it, and from history we all think it's the oil crisis. And what were the arguments against not having it then? I assume those arguments then are as valid as they are now. And so the question is, should oil concerns still be judged, as more important than pedestrian concerns or whatever was deemed as, as the negative impacts at the time it was introduced. I don't know if anyone has any, clear history of that.
Thank you, John Mark. I'm going to mute your line now and ask Kevin to address your question. Kevin, can you give us a bit of history on
Yeah, I mean, right, he has it right on the nose in terms of the arguments for right turn on red. Historically, it is exactly that, in that it was supposed to save gas. To my knowledge, there's been minimal or no research that actually happened. I don't know, going back to what Michael said, I don't know that pointing out that it was a failure in terms of saving gas actually gets us anywhere, because if the arguments against it were that, then obviously it hasn't gotten us anywhere thus far, and I don't know that it's a good way to package the debate in terms of its historic reasons. Obviously, I believe that. Obviously, we all have a good belief that this is it's detrimental to cyclists and pedestrians, and potentially even to other motor vehicles. And maybe that's the better package. But how to package that is indeed a good question. But in terms of looking back on saving gas, I think even just the illusion still today that it could save gas would be more powerful than the idea that it hasn't thus far.
Given that a lot of decisions are data-driven, and we just had an announcement today from U.S. Department of Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox about a new mayor's challenge to begin to move the 17% of all traffic fatalities being bike pedestrian fatalities, to reduce that through very specific activities. I wonder if the data shows that, makes any kind of link between right turn on red and traffic fatalities for pedestrians. Kevin, in your work so far, have you seen that, or is that something that we could put on the list of things to research?
Guess not specifically, because like we talked about before, there hasn't been much discussion at all in terms of this particular issue when it comes to safety and the like, in the mainstream anyways, and it's been a little difficult to find data related to it. Right, as it stands right now, the existing data is still somewhat skewed towards the perception that it's safe, even if that data is contradictory to itself. It would be easy to point to conclusions and say that it's not. I think that the idea that I get from the data is that we need more data and we need better methodologies to go with it. The right turn on red issue shouldn't be seen as simply an issue in terms of crashes. It's an issue of the culture of being a person out on the street. you don't have to have been hit by a car to be afraid of being hit by a car. And you're more likely to be hit by it, or you're more likely to be afraid if you just don't know what a car is going to do. And it creates an ambiguity, but we don't have data that shows that.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, let's go back to our participants for today's APBP Live policy discussion. And I notice we have another person who has joined us. I'm going to do my best to say your name, and then I'll unmute your line. Amandeep Man, your line is open if you're able to introduce yourself using your audio connection. Are you able to introduce yourself verbally? If not, you can also do that through the question box, and I'll gladly read your introduction. I'm not hearing any audio, so I'll mute that line. And also Andrew Blanchard, we tried once before, and Andrew, if you're able to introduce yourself verbally, your line is open. Okay, and if not, then please feel free if you have a question or a comment or would like to introduce yourself. We'd love to get to know you. So just post that to the question box and I'll read it as time permits. So back to you, Kevin. You might need to pose your question one more time to get the discussion going. Oh, and here we go. Amandeep Man says, hello, I am the transportation engineer with the village of Skokie, and that's in Illinois. Welcome. Glad you're here. Okay, back to you, Kevin.
Well, actually, what I got thinking about, if I just skip ahead here to some, we discussed these potential solutions last time during discussion. People brought several of these things up. And what I wonder, especially because we have multiple people who said they tuned in because they're interested, they're doing some facility design, or they're interested in doing this in their communities, what it is exactly that they are looking for, how is it that they are looking to deal with right turn on red currently? What is it that they hope to gain from this?
So if you have a question or a comment, if you'd like to raise your hand, I can unmute your line, or you can also post your response to the question box, and I can read it and share it with everyone else on the call. And perhaps this is a good moment to step back and describe what APBP Live is all about. About a year ago, one of our new board members, Vivian Coleman, who was serving as secretary at the time and also in charge of the listserv monitoring, and she wondered if there was a way to bring some of the discussions that happen on the listserv into a more vibrant discussion, a more personal discussion once a month that could eventually lead to a policy statement by APBP. And I think she was imagining that because she also chairs the Communication Committee, which she's continuing to do, and the Policy and Legislation Action Team is within the Communication Committee. So although a lot of the focus of that action team has been on U.S. federal policy, there's a great interest in reaching beyond just the transportation bill, the U.S. transportation bill, to other types of policy. And so we would love to hear from APBP members about a particular policy. APBP's board is eager to hear from the membership and identify what topics are in need of a policy statement from APBP, which we would craft as a result of these APBP Live meetings and then put before the board for consideration. And currently, I think the board's thinking is that it would go to the membership for ratification, but we haven't actually walked through that process, so stay tuned about exactly how that will work. With that said, I would like now to open up Michael King's line because he has some comments that he would like to make. And Michael, if you'll just permit me one more thing, Dan Allison says, for me, The question is right turn on red any more of a problem? Okay, sorry about that. Dan Allison says, for me the question is right turn on red any more of a problem than right turns in general, which is certainly a fascinating question. And something that with alternative intersections, I think we were looking at the issues of turning motions. But Michael, please do speak, and if you would like to show us anything, we can also give you the screen if you would like.
I don't really have anything that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. I don't really have anything to show. So there's a couple of sort of things. I've been dealing with right turn on red for a while, and so lots of things. Excuse me. The first thing is to maybe understand that the way a lot of intersections around the world are operated or function is with some sort of semblance of right turn on red. If you go to Holland, or if you go to India, or if you go to a lot of sort of unsignalized places without really traffic control, but just kind of the way you drive is you sort of drive up to the corner and kind of start to turn, and that's kind of how a roundabout functions and things like that. So one of the things I want people to think about or to consider is that, and I realize that I'm completely contradicting myself by saying this, but right turn on red is kind of the way that some intersections in very safe countries operate, sort of as a general rule. So I want to think about that. Now, let's just throw that out there. The other thing to think about is somebody asked about the history. The history is, yes, in the 70s, there's the beginning of 74. The data, the research that was done back then was inconclusive at best, that it would actually do anything. In terms of saving gas, you could probably make a pretty good argument that right turn on red actually increases driving, but I don't know if you could actually have something stick on that. The research back then suggested that crashes, the impacts to the pedestrians would be negative, and I don't know, because it'd be really hard to kind of tease that out. I kind of disagree that things are made on a data-driven basis that we want them to be, and maybe in the tech community they are, but I think a lot of what we're dealing with in the street traffic engineering department is completely policy and political related. I need to drive everywhere all the time or I will die, and so ergo we have to provide accordingly, whatever the data says. But there's some good, I think I sent Kevin some articles about, and some old research about how the decision to do right turn on red wasn't actually data-driven, it was completely politics. Another sort of thing to think about is that the impacts on the people with low vision. It's very problematic from an accessibility point of view, and so that is one angle to get at if you want to start changing things. It's a politically safe angle or politically expedient angle. Right turn on red is a problem for people with blind trying to cross the street. Another thing to think about is the cyclists. As a cyclist in a city that doesn't allow right turn on red, I have a different interface at intersections than I do when I ride in cities that other places that allow right turn on red. And you can usually tell and I live in New York, and you can always tell from the license plates whether drivers are going to where they're going to stop at the intersection, because the New Yorkers know to stop at the stop line or sort of close, and you can see a license plate from South Carolina or Pennsylvania or Canada, and they're always sort of turning the corner before they stop. So, but the relationship between cycling and right turn on red, I think, is something that is not very well documented or studied or researched, and the link should be, if you wanted to do this, the link could be made. There's good studies from Denmark that I've seen that show that a right turn on red is problematic because it sort of gets in the way of the way cyclists need to use intersections. So there you go. There's 4 things that the way intersections are used without signals, which is sort of a de facto right turn on red. So think about that in terms of how it's operated. The second one is that the research is not there. What never was there. It was all politics. And so to try to combat this on a research angle is a little bit, not sure get anywhere. The ADA with accessibility issue is something that I think is very appealing in terms of a vehicle to change right turn on red. And then the overlap with cyclists is something that you could sort of get some buy-in there. And then finally, what we proposed in one city that wanted to sort of change their policies on right turn on red, but didn't want to do whole cloth, is we set up a policy where they would say, well, around schools or transit and metro stops or senior citizens, something on parks, you could sort of outline a geographic boundary that says, in these areas we certainly don't want drivers sort of rounding the corner, along bike routes with cycle tracks or buffered bike lanes or whatever the heck you want to call them. It'd be prohibited there, just kind of as a right or as a blanket prohibition. So different ways to kind of start to chop away at the sort of the blanket allowance of turning on red, right or left turn on red. Anyway, there you go. That's all I've got.
Well, thank you, Michael. And it looks like we have a hand up from John Mark.
Actually.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Kevin.
Kit, I wanted to quickly address Dan's question before we got to some of these raised hands, because that was actually something that we discussed last time a lot, is why are red light right turns more dangerous or worthy of note than other right turns. And I've been thinking about it because I think that's an important question, and I don't have any data to substantiate anything, but I believe what makes them different is that the red light right turn is the only right turn where the driver feels like they are inherently in danger and therefore must make quick decisions and quick movements. Whereas if they are on green, they still may be dangerous and they still may turn too fast, but that would come from absent-mindedness, and which is a problem, but it would be the same problem on a red light right turn as it would be otherwise. And I believe that's what makes a red light right turn more dangerous than the others.
Okay, thank you. Good point. Shall we take comments and questions now? We have a question from, or a hand raised from John Mark Lucas. So John Mark, your line is open, and I'm muting Michael King's line currently. Okay, so go ahead, John Mark.
Hi. Just a few reactions to what Dan said. It's a bit of a shame that we cannot put together a data argument, because I do agree a lot of the questions normally when you talk about traffic engineering and safety, a lot of it is perception. But I wonder if anyone has done a clear comparison on types of pedestrian vehicle motor crashes that we have, where in the U.S. we have right turn on red as a general rule allowed, versus in Europe or in other parts of Asia where generally it's banned except when permitted by a specific traffic signal head. You know, as a background, I've had half of my career, over 10 years, working, you know, in Asia and Europe, doing traffic engineering and transportation planning. It really is quite surprising to me to have the right turn on red still in the U.S. You know, intersections are busy enough, I feel, and to have that uncertainty between the pedestrian and vehicle right-of-way on right turn on red instances, it does put extra stress on both drivers and pedestrians. It's true what Dan said about the cycling experience. You know, in Europe we have, or you know, in the UK or Ireland, we, you know, like those bike boxes that we like now in the US. As a general rule, you know, there's no right turn on red, and so there's very little conflict with pedestrians. And those bike boxes are actually put in there to give advantage to bicyclists to move up to the stop of the, you know, beginning of the stop line, so that they go ahead before vehicles, and also that resolves the conflict of left turn or right turn hooks, as the case may be. It's the same case with pedestrians. You know, you mentioned the same thing about drivers from out of state not respecting the stop line. And it is kind of, you know, sometimes when I try to turn right on red here as a driver, you know, I feel kind of embarrassed that, you know, really as a driver, you are, anyone who's attempting to make a right turn on red, you know, invariably blocks the pedestrian crossing. And so again, it's that violation of that space. And one last item that I'd like to point out is that we talk about pedestrian planning, and then the desire to lessen the pedestrian exposure to vehicle traffic, reducing crossing distances. I see the right turn on red as, you know, as a simple excuse at times to widen the, you know, have an extra lane at the intersection to allow left turns, right turn on red, you know, a separate lane for it. And sometimes it becomes a good excuse for just, let's put another lane there so that we don't block the traffic, and it unnecessarily increases the pedestrian crossing distance again. So that's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, John Marcus. Really good points. And if I may, I will take the moderator's prerogative for just a moment to share with you a statement from the Pedestrian and Bicyclist Safety and Mobility in Europe report. This was the international scan. APBP participated in it, and on there in quite a number of places it does talk about right turn on red, but essentially what we saw is outlined on page 25. In most countries, right turn on red restrictions for motorists were the norm rather than the exception. That is, right turn on red for motorists was restricted unless otherwise signed. In the U.S., the right turn on red is permitted unless otherwise signed, so we do it quite the opposite. So that reinforces what you had said, John Marcus. And then Mariel Brown has made a statement in the question box. Mariel, I'm going to open your line. Just if you would like to state it yourself, that would be lovely. If you're...
I was just saying that if the city were going to implement several bike boxes at once, it might actually be an opportunity to produce data on right turn on red, because you would have, if you did like a dozen intersections at once, you'd be able to look at the pedestrian impacts.
Great, good, okay, and I shared your comment with the group, so thanks for that. Any other comments to share with the group? I see Eileen's hand is raised, so your line is open. Eileen.
Hi, I wanted to make just one more point, which is that one of the issues that I find myself confronting, especially more recently as a pedestrian, is that Under DC law in Washington, D.C., a pedestrian has to step off the curb and begin crossing the street with a walk signal. And because our Department of Transportation is going through this process of what they call optimizing intersection signals, there are places where the walk portion of the signal is becoming extremely short. In some places it's only about 4 seconds that you have to get off the curb. So if you have a driver who is trying to make their right on red and they're obstructing your path into the crosswalk, effectively they're depriving you of the opportunity to cross the street at all during the time that you have the right to do it. That's my comment. So I haven't seen anybody else make that.
Great, thank you, Eileen. A very good point indeed. All right, I've muted Eileen's line, and who else would like to make a comment? Please raise your hand. All right, feel free to raise your hand at any time. Otherwise, we'll go back to Kevin.
I have a thought during the previous comment where we heard about bike boxes being a potential opportunity to gather data, and I hear that, and I like it in theory, but in practice, what I worry about is exactly how we would gather data and what that data would be. Because again, if we're only referring to crashes, it may just end up that the data seems like right turn on red is no problem at all, when in fact, like the last comment we heard, right turn on red has further reaching consequences than just simply crashes. And I don't really know of a good way to measure that exactly. Not that there isn't a good way, but I feel like if we were going to promote gathering data, I think that we should, but I think we should really think about what it means to gather data and what that data should be and how it should be collected.
Kevin, interestingly, when we talked about this topic in December, Michael Moule had provided us with a lot of examples that he has seen in his practice and that he uses in the courses that he teaches. And he was showing a number of images which, because I live in a smaller town now, I'm not as familiar with that. But it's a mechanism by which you can, at a controlled intersection where you have traffic signals, you can place a sign that can light up or not, allowing or prohibiting a right turn on red, which was a very interesting example. And I will say that because APBP participated in the international scan, and one of the recommendations of the international scan is to evaluate the right turn on red policy, I do think this is a topic that's ripe for our board and our membership to take a position on. So we have a comment from Dan, whose audio isn't functioning, so I'll just share that with you. He's commenting about your point, Eileen, relative to law enforcement interpretation that you can only start on walk indication. And he isn't quite sure that that is a correct interpretation, but one that we can talk about at another time. I'll share that with you, Eileen, and with the group in just a moment. And then John Mark Lucas suggests, could video surveys and observation of near misses be used as a measure? And I think that's a good question, John Mark, so I'm going to unmute your line for you to explore that a bit more with us. Your line is open, John Mark.
Oh, it's just an idea when we talk about how we might observe and how we might gather data. I agree. If we go through the accident records, we would probably find ourselves starting for an argument. So we talk more about how easy it is nowadays, to do video recording, and might be use of better technology. One other thing that I know our Department of Public Safety here is contemplating shortly is to do a distracted driving and pedestrian survey, and it might be one of those things wherein when we do studies like that, we might incorporate that when we do observational surveys of intersections.
Great point. Thanks, John Mark. Okay, so Kevin, I don't see any other hands raised right now.
Okay, and yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I like the idea of a distracted driving type of way of looking at it. I also think that near misses is a good way of looking at it, and it would be nice, I think, if there could be a way using some advanced video technology to even just document, say, pedestrian disruptions, even if a potentially right-turning vehicle simply disrupts the pedestrian in their path, because as has been noted before, it could be that a car is parked in the crosswalk and someone then just can't go for a full cycle, or even if it's someone, say, who is a young child or someone who might be kind of intimidated by a car that's inching as it's waiting to go, they may pause and hesitate, and they may end up crossing the street before the car. But I think that would be another good way to see that a car turning right on red is how it's affecting the pedestrian experience without actually having a crash or even necessarily a near miss. We don't have any questions or comments at the moment. Okay.
Yeah. So Kevin, how would you describe to all of us what work has already been done, and where would we go to see the information that members have already shared on this topic, or perhaps your conversation at Transportation Camp when you presented with a couple of people, Fanula and Rick, I think?
Well, in regards to the discussion that we had at Transportation Camp, to the session that we presented, I can actually send everyone a link to the session notes, and a lot of them are what ended up on the screen here today, but I can send the notes to what we discussed there. In terms of the other information, it's out there sporadically. There's FHWA information that, again, I could provide links to, and Michael sent me some information that I could probably make into somewhat of a report to send out as well. The problem with information has generally been that this hasn't been much of an issue for most groups, seemingly, and I'm thinking that's why I'm hoping that maybe APBP can be a leader in making it a topic of discussion and putting it out there. And what I'm hoping, is that what we can get out of this discussion, now that we don't have as much time, is how do we proceed as a group, as a membership group, exactly what our role should be in terms of, if we have a policy, what should that policy be and how should we approach it? What people think about that?
And this is Kit. I'll just jump in for a moment and say that Dan Allison said he agrees with the comment about pedestrian interruption. It's a key issue in addition to the safety issue, and that was a topic actually that we looked at in our monthly webinar yesterday, was on level of service for pedestrians and bicyclists, and a lot of very interesting thinking coming from Nick Foster and Peter Kuntz on the topic. So I highly recommend that. We've done a couple of other sessions looking at how the Highway Capacity Manual introduced a multimodal level of service in 2010, and certainly I think we're at a stage where we'd like to see it go beyond the initial recommendation. So you all are on the cutting edge of this program, pardon me, development, and we would love to have your guidance, particularly because APBP board member Byron Rushing is with us. We would like to receive member guidance on what you would like to see your organization do with this topic and other policy topics like it. Michael King has posed a question. Michael, I'm going to open your line for you to share it with the group, although I'm not sure I can. It looks like you've muted yourself, so if you can unmute yourself. Go ahead, Michael.
Testing, testing, testing.
You're good.
All right. Well, why don't you just read what I wrote?
I want to hear.
Create I mean, if we want to change the world, get it out there. So put the research, like Kevin, you just said, you could coalesce this kind of stuff into some research, some possible positions, some observations. I think all these things are interesting about what people said about the overlap with the bike. I mean, you could document other countries, how maybe they looked at right turn on red. We're the only ones that do, but I don't know how that relevant it is. But I'm interested in all these sort of crossover kind of things about how to do the video survey so that you can document these sort of near misses. I mean, the people who are at the forefront of crash reduction are the ones who are looking at the crash iceberg, as it were, which is, it's only the 5% that actually results in some sort of a collision gets reported somewhere. So the other 95% that's under the water. So, I mean, all these kind of point out all these kind of things, and maybe if you throw it out there, say, please upload your videos. I shoot videos all the time on the iPhone or just standing around, and say, shoot some video of a right turn on red and try to tell your story with a video. Show the video with the bike box. Or the lack of a bike box, right turn on red, you can't come to the head of a queue. Show your video of your 4-second, I can't cross the street because, some guys hanging out, blocking the crosswalk, so forth and so on. Show all that kind of stuff and put that up there, and then let that be a thing. That's it. That's all I got.
That's a great idea, Michael, and certainly we've seen that kind of power to change ideas coming through the work that Street Films has done, just by, they're using something a little bit higher end than an iPhone, but now we all have the ability to shoot video with our cell phone. So fantastic idea. We'll put that.
Don't dismiss iPhone videos.
Oh, I'm not at all. Not at all.
Well, right. I mean, all those kind of things in Egypt and those revolutions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You've got it. You've got it in your pocket.
You bet. All right. Good. I did not intend to disparage iPhones by any means. It's quite remarkable, actually. So, interesting idea. This is also APBP's first time having a fellow, and so one of Kevin's areas of expertise is research, and this might be, especially because he's fond of this issue, this would be a good one to start that prototype conversation through a website or a web page on the website. So, brilliant suggestion. Thank you, Michael, for that. Any other comments or questions? We have about 6 minutes left. I would like to bring to everyone's attention, if they haven't seen it, if you're based in the U.S., as a member, you will have just received an alert that Secretary Fox has issued a challenge to mayors to take up the cause of pedestrian and bicycle safety and presumably mobility as well. And one of the first recommendations that he makes is through the 7 challenges. One is complete streets. So take a look at that link, and I will also send it to, I think we have at least one person from Canada, so I'll send that to you in just a moment through the Q&A box. Any other comments or thoughts? John Mark has raised his hand, so John Mark, your line is open.
Just a point of clarification, Kate, on, you mentioned that APBP is pursuing this as one of the issues, or, one of the action items arising from that international scan. How, is this meant, is this discussion meant to be part of that? Would a certain group be formed to pursue this?
Great question. We have the team of people who went on the international scan. I believe the delegation included 12 people, most of them selected by either Federal Highway Administration or AASHTO. And then industry was invited, which is how APBP was able to go. And most of the people who were tagged to come didn't have day-to-day experience in an actual city environment working on these kinds of things or working with other cities. So APBP appointed David Henderson to participate in the international scan, and we did that in part based on our funders' request. The person who underwrote the ability for APBP to participate in the international scan, since we had to pay our own way. We've been talking about doing a 5-year report card. The report has been out 5 years now. So we would actually indicate one by one the progress that has or has not yet been made on the recommendations. So that would be one place that would hopefully be able to bring more players than just APBP to the table. That said, a number of the people on the international scan team are no longer in their positions. A few have retired, so our numbers dwindle a bit. But sometimes just getting the conversation started can lead to remarkable advancements. So that would be how I would respond, John Mark. And then we have a question from Dan, which I will read since his audio isn't functioning. Given the lack of certainty about the benefit of prohibiting right turn on red, I think APBP should not adopt a policy at this time, but should continue to discuss and study. So a great point. I'll share that with the group in a moment. And Eileen simply says, very interesting discussion. Thanks. I'll follow up with Dan in the forum or by email. I agree that about PED interruption, it was in some right turn on red is just one example, so good point there. Any other comments or questions? Kevin, you want to go ahead and wrap us up in our remaining minute?
Yeah, I mean, just, thanks for everyone for coming and for sharing. I think everyone made a lot of good points, and including that last point by Dan, that maybe we shouldn't exactly adopt a policy yet, but it's something we're going to have to look at, and we'll any policy we had, just as a matter of a process or understanding, any policy that we would potentially adopt it would go to member vote. So we wouldn't have this discussion and then throw together a policy and then that's just the policy. Anything that we come to, members will eventually vote on. So at least that could allay the concerns that things are rushed or not considered enough. But I hoped to win over Dan this time. He's been very skeptical, and not for not good reason. There is a lot of uncertainty still when it comes to this in the United States, just because it's so abnormal in the United States and in Canada. But I think that the state of the world shows a lot how it should be, and hopefully that's something that I hope that we can get to is addressing this policy head on, this topic.
Great point. Thank you, Kevin. And Catherine is, I think, our only participant today from Canada. So, Catherine, know that we would welcome your thoughts and comments, and you can direct them to Kevin either via the forum online at apbp.org in the members only under either APBP Live or APBP Forum, or you can email Kevin at apbp.fellow@apbp.org. And with that, Kevin, I thank you for your work on this topic. Thank you to all who participated today, and we will adjourn our meeting and